Next slide, please. Next slide. Next slide. Yeah, thank you. So again, University of California Global Health Institute, it's a 10 campus-wide entity, and among other things, it supports the GloCal Health Fellowship, which supports training across all 10 of our campuses, as well as 20 partners in 17 different countries. Next slide. Next slide. So the program was first funded in 2012. It's funded by the National Institutes of Health Fogarty International Center. And we're one of 6 programs that are funded. We so far have supported 114 fellows in the first 8 GloCal cohorts. This year is our largest cohort ever, and we actually have 22 fellows this year. So the program expanded. Next slide. Here are the directors and co-directors, myself and Stephanie Strathy at UC San Diego, our multiple PIs, and then Pat Conrad, who's on this call at Davis, and Jeff at UCLA. You can reach out to any of us, depending on your interest, and Kimberly can also serve as a liaison if you need an introduction. Next slide. Next slide. So the program has 4 components. As I mentioned, it's a 12-month hands-on research project in a low or middle-income country, one of our 17 countries or 20 affiliated institutions we partner with. The program requirement is 11 of 12 months in country. We believe very strongly that a successful career in research requires development of a mentorship team. And so I'll discuss this more later, but we obviously ensure that and want to ensure that you are supported by a strong group of mentors, including those of you who come to the University of California from your own campus, potentially other campuses, and of course from the partner sites as well. Education is also less of a focus area, but we do provide opportunities for online education, or you have the ability to be able to sign up for courses at your own institution or other institutions as they meet the needs of your career development and for research. And then we focus on career development. A lot of people need support for next steps in addition to your mentorship team. In fact, yesterday we held our first, I think for this new cohort, our first professional development webinar. Then almost all I think 21 of our 22 fellows were actually on that webinar yesterday, and it was highly acclaimed. It's actually one of our alums who presented, Jesse Clark from UCLA, talked about his career in global. Next slide. Okay. So the map here depicts the countries that we partner with. As you can see, we predominantly work in Sub-Saharan Africa, Southern Africa, East Africa, Central Africa, and to a lesser degree, West Africa, including Ghana. And I believe there's interest in working in Ghana, at least with one of you on the call today. In addition, in South Asia, we work in Bangladesh and in India, and in Southeast Asia and Vietnam. Latin America, we work in Peru and Guatemala. We had to modify our sites from our first 5 years to this 5 years. So countries that matured to high-income countries and G20 countries such as Mexico, we unfortunately had to remove from the program. So the requirement is to work in one of these countries. And if you have questions about that, we can ask those in the question and answers portion. Next slide. Just a list of the countries that I just mentioned. Next slide. Next. Okay, so GloCal is open to a variety of individuals. So we are open to U.S. postdoctoral fellows. Again, the requirement for the U.S. postdoctoral fellows is that they are American citizens and or residents. We're open to foreign postdoctoral fellows, which would be from any of our 17 partner countries. Yeah, they, again, have to have a doctorate in, it could be an MBCHB, it could be a PhD, MD, DBM, et cetera. We're also open to senior professional students. MD, DDS, DVM, PharmD, et cetera, and also advanced doctoral students, those who are working in their PhD. Typically, people have used this year as a research year to contribute towards their thesis. And for the doctoral students and the professional students, they need to be from one of the 10 UC campuses. Next slide.
So GloCal is a very interdisciplinary program. This is a program that is not just restricted to the health sciences. The health sciences include public health, medicine, dentistry, pharmacy, veterinary medicine. We've made a special effort to reach out to non-health related disciplines such as genetics and other basic science, sociology, psychology, engineering, math, anthropology, agriculture, environmental science. The list can go on. We see global health as a very interdisciplinary kind of program, and that we need players from many different disciplines to ensure that we can improve the health of people everywhere. So don't be swayed if you come from a non-health science background. Next slide. So the selection process. So we have a steering committee for GloCal, and that includes people from our campuses as well as our international sites. We have an initial review of the applications, which this year are coming in on November 8th. We set up interviews for the candidates who are shortlisted, and we do these by Skype or teleconference. And then we rank those, and recommendations are made to the leadership group. And the leadership group then decides acceptance based on the evaluations, the diversity of disciplines, their research focus, and then how much funding that we're being allocated by the Fogarty International Center and UCGHI. Next slide. So our priority, as dictated by Fogarty, is that there's a special emphasis on recruiting trainees to conduct research on HIV and non-HIV related mental health topics. And this is because the National Institute on Mental Health has made a significant contribution, and they are looking to expand research outside of HIV in the mental health arena. And so we especially encourage researchers that are interested in working in these areas to apply. Next slide. And that's just a photo of one of our fellows. Next slide. Now I'm just going to highlight a couple of our successful fellows just to give you an idea of what background they had and where they've ended up. So Natalie Ferriolo was a medical student here at UC San Diego. She submitted a project working on depression among deportees undergoing gang tattoo removal in Tijuana. Tijuana, Mexico was a site at one point, but unfortunately, due to Mexico being now relegated to an upper middle income country, it's not currently eligible as a site. We're hoping to change that in the future. Natalie's current position is that she's a fellow with the Academy of Integrative Health and Medicine. She's also a physician. Another fellow is Kendra Byrd. She was a doctoral student at UC Davis, and her project was on understanding associations between infection, inflammation, and iron status in babies. And she did her work in Kenya, and she has a current position as a nutrition scientist for World Fish in Malaysia. So as you can see, a very different kind of a background and trajectory. The next person is Javier Cepeda. This is actually one of the fellows that I've worked closely with. He was a U.S. postdoc, a Mexican-American fellow. He was recruited to UC San Diego from Johns Hopkins and previously Yale. He did a cost effectiveness analysis of a police education program that we had running in Tijuana, again, when Mexico was eligible as a GloCal site. And he was able to publish this work and also received some awards for this. He is currently an assistant professor in the Division of Global Public Health and Infectious Diseases in the Department of Medicine here at UC San Diego. And he has a KO1. In fact, he submitted his KO1 and got it the very first time with a 1 percentile. So that's an area that we are hoping to develop training capacity for our fellows, is that they would be able to learn how to write grant applications, and so that you can segue into an academic career afterwards if that's your intention. And the last fellow that we wanted to highlight is Megan Swanson. She was a US postdoc based at UCSF, and her project was on identifying barriers and facilitators to cervical cancer care in Uganda. And she's currently a clinical instructor in OBGYN at UCSF, so is doing very well. Oh yes, and there is one more fellow, another one that I know intimately. Jennifer Syvertsen was a US postdoc who did her work here in UC San Diego on emerging injection drug use and HIV risk in Kenya. And she did her GloCal fellowship, went off to Ohio State University, and then returned as an assistant professor at UC Riverside, where she is currently based. And now she's mentoring postdocs in GloCal. So it's just terrific to kind of see that legacy. And Kalika Kwanda is she was a junior faculty. At one point we were allowed to support junior faculty beyond postdocs, but I don't believe that we're currently allowed to do that. She submitted through UCLA, and her project was on voluntary counseling and testing for gay men based with couples, gay male couples in Peru. And she's currently an assistant professor both at UCLA and at the Universidad Peruana Cayetano Heredia. So that's UPCH in Peru. Next slide is just a photo of mentorship in action. And our mentorship is really the foundation of our program because you know, we really try to team people up to form a partnership that's going to support their career. And so each fellow works with 3 different mentors. We have an innovative trans mentorship model that I'll describe. Next slide. So the mentor requirements for fellows, we require that one mentor be from one of the 4 GloCal consortium campuses. So that's Davis, UCLA, UC San Diego, or UCSF. One mentor needs to be from the international site where the fellow is proposing to do their work. And then we have one trans mentor who's a senior investigator from a different field of expertise or a different geographic location. And this person can be from a different UC as well, because we're trying to promote collaborations across the UC system. And if you have trouble identifying a trans mentor, you can contact us and we can help find somebody for you. The expectations of the mentors is that one of the 3 mentors will serve as the primary mentor and be in contact with the trainee weekly during the fellowship. All members of the mentorship team are supposed to participate in monthly conference calls with the trainee or Skype calls to discuss their progress and their goals. And mentors are expected to assist the trainee throughout their training program and engage in conversations about their career and give them advice and help them network, etc. And it's expected that all the mentors read and give feedback on the proposal, and you know, so that you have the best chance of being successful right from the beginning. So tips for a successful application. So we have some examples of successful applications that we thought were particularly helpful. We got the applicants to agree to sharing them. So we also have not just these, but an application checklist on the GloCal website, which is given there. As mentioned, we expect the mentors to review and provide feedback on the application before they submit. Next slide. So we have also collaborations across the 6 Fogarty fellowships. So I mentioned there's GloCal, and then there's 5 other fellowship programs that are sponsored by Fogarty around the US, and they have other international partners as well. And so there's a networking opportunity for fellows at the orientation, which is generally the 1st or 2nd week of July. So we tell applicants to hold that week open, and if you're going to be selected, it's a mandatory orientation that you need to attend, and it's paid for. And so there's professional networking, and there's presentations from completed fellows as well as investigators from all of the different consortia. And then there's also regional and scientific meetings and trainings that vary on a year-to-year basis, and these are often in lower middle income countries. So, for example, there was one in Kenya not too long ago. There was another one in West Africa, and we try to provide opportunities for fellows nearby to attend these. There's also the Consortium for Universities of Global Health, which is a group that is worldwide, and the CGH has an annual conference. It's based in the United States, and we encourage fellows to submit abstracts once they have results from their project. There was also a publication in the American Journal of Tropical Medicine and Hygiene that described our program, and another issue that focused on the mentorship of GloCal and the other consortia. So you can check that out if you'd like. And all of the 6 programs work together. So for example, if an applicant submits to us and we feel that they're better suited to another consortium, then we make referrals. That doesn't happen very often, but we're kind of, a real network of people that are trying to support all of our fellows. Next slide. So as I mentioned, the applications are due November 8th. That's so that it allows us to give a really comprehensive review and to do interviews with the applicants on the short list. Kimberly Bale is really the person who makes GloCal run. Many of you have already been in touch with her. Her email address is there, and she is just a terrific resource. And so I want to also thank her for making this webinar possible today, as well as her staff. We're going to go on to hear from one of our completed GloCal fellows. So Kimberly, can you introduce her, please?
Yes. Yes, now we're going to hear from Eileen Chang, who is a dermatologist and is now an assistant professor at UCSF. She did her GloCal fellowship a few years ago. So welcome, Eileen. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me and for this opportunity to chat a little bit about my GloCal experience. I'm just maneuvering to share my screen with you. Okay. All right. Do you all see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Great. Let me just do this. Okay. I think, the simple answer to the question proposed on this title slide is basically surrounds 4 themes. Many of them you already heard about. So mentorship is fantastic and really is a foundation of why GloCal is such an extraordinary experience and was just so transformative for my career. So mentorship, a professional network, both at UC, but also perhaps more importantly in the low and middle income country that you end up working in. Then also protected time, and all of those things feed into career development. So those are the short answers, and I'll expand upon that. I have this slide up just to give you a sense of my background before I was a GloCal fellow, and I was in fact one of these recruits from outside the UC system. I had identified a mentor at UCSF that I wanted to work with, and then that's really what brought me to UC, and I've stayed in the fold since then. So my project was surrounding Kaposi sarcoma, specifically was looking at the PD-1 pathway within KS tissue and trying to understand better biology of KS to inform therapeutics. My project was maybe a little bit unique in the sense that patients were recruited from a site in Western Kenya, and then the specimens were analyzed at the Infectious Disease Institute in Kampala in Uganda, which is where my GloCal site was. The study just finished recruiting, so it took a few years to kind of get us to this point, and you might be wondering, well, why is this individual speaking? So I hope to share with you all the things that were still incredibly valuable from my fellowship experience. So as I mentioned, mentorship. So this is, Toby Maurer was my sort of primary UCSF mentor, and then Andrew Kambugu was my mentor at the IDI. He was the head of research at the time, and he's now the executive director of IDI. Just to give you a sense of the mentorship that I had, you know, so with Toby, I was on a weekly call with her, and then I also saw her about 4 times a year in Uganda. And then, of course, Andrew Kambuga was in Uganda, and I had a monthly check-in with him. His subject, you know, his subject area of expertise was not in Kaposi sarcoma, but working with him was incredibly helpful in just kind of seeing the logistics and behind the scenes of how research is actually done. In LMICs, you know, there are some complexities in terms of when you get a grant, and then there's some contracts, and just sort of learning the ropes of what it looks like from the admin side, which if you're going to become a senior investigator, you're going to need to know. And then Jeff Morgan was my trans mentor. He's at UCSF, and he's in the Department of Epidemiology. I was on a weekly call with him, and I saw him a couple of times that year in person as well. And Dr. Strathy had emphasized how the trans mentor component is a novel and a really great part of the mentorship team. And I have to say that as an alumnus, that I think that's absolutely so true, that Jeff really gave me a perspective that my other 2 mentors didn't give me, because that's just really not their expertise. And a lot of the things that I learned from Jeff, I've really carried forward with me for other projects. So this is me and Roger Glass, who is the director of Fogarty at the NIH orientation, which is fantastic. The NIH orientation was one of the highlights of my GloCal year. It's incredible. It's one of the biggest things I tell people is like, the orientation's phenomenal. I mean, your year will be great too, but the orientation's really great. Roger was so excited to meet me because he had sort of been hoping that a dermatologist would be a Fogarty fellow one day. And so I was that first dermatologist. So I think that Dr. Strathy did a great job of talking through the orientation, and I'll just focus on the fact that I think one of the really wonderful things about the GloCal Fellowship is developing your LMIC network. And, you know, I think culturally speaking in North America and some of the sort of more Western countries, we do a lot of interactions through email and phone calls. But in a lot of cultures that we work in LMIC settings, those face-to-face interactions are invaluable and really cannot be replaced. And having a year of that, of being able to meet folks in person, was phenomenal. And I can say moving forward, now that I'm not based in Uganda and I only go back a couple of times a year, having sort of put in that legwork during that first year has really been very fruitful moving forward. And it really just gives you an opportunity to get to know people and the space that you're working in. The other thing is that when you're based there, based in the LMIC country, you have an opportunity to attend regional meetings that you might not otherwise attend. So this is a really memorable trip that I had as a fellow because I had time to take field visits where I first encountered migrants in the African setting, and this is right along the Western Uganda border with Lake Albert and with DRC on the other side. And I met these fisher women who I just thought were amazing. But I sort of learned their journey, and I bring it up because now I'm really interested in migrant health. And this was sort of my first introduction to migrants and sort of some of their, what their life is like. So really the point was to talk about protected time. So of course you have the protected time to work on your GloCal project, but then you're also, you have sort of opportunistic experiences that can come your way just by being in the place that you are and with the expertise that you have. I also really enjoyed the formal course component of the fellowship, and that for me included taking an introduction to implementation science, where it was offered through UCSF, and you had an opportunity to write up a whole protocol during the course, of course guided by instructors, TAs, combined with a weekly small group session. And luckily for me and my classmates, we actually had a Kampala-based small group. At least there was, I think, 5 of us who had taken this course. And so we met in person to kind of have that small group experience, which was really invaluable. And it was led by a GloCal alumnus. And I already alluded to this, but it's, you know, field visits are harder to do when you take shorter trips. And so being somewhere for 1 year really helps you get out there because you feel like you have the time to actually do that. And I'll get to field visits in a second. So this is just a flavor. I mentioned that my GloCal project with KS took some time to get ramped up. And so what did I do in the meantime? So one of the opportunities I had from being in Uganda was to work on this group A strep skin infection study, where they were trying to see if group A strep skin infection was potentially contributing to the burden of rheumatic heart disease in Uganda. And so I got to join in that project, and in this photo, I'm sort of explaining to this child what a skin surface swab is and what I'm about to do. But now scabies, so scabies kind of plays into the story, and I won't get into that, but scabies is now one of my major research interests, and it all kind of stemmed from my experience during my GloCal year. Other project that is one of my primary projects now is looking at lymphedema from Kaposi sarcoma. And so we partnered with Purdue University during my GloCal year to develop low-cost grant from the NIH. And this is, as I mentioned, one of my main focus areas now. So this is out in the field in Eastern Uganda. I think these field visits are really important in helping contextualize your research questions, and also just getting back at the practical issues with conducting research and learning the logistics. If you've seen the setting in which your data may be collected and your research team is going to be out there doing their work, it really helps inform the way that you design your standard operating protocols and, you know, even your research study to begin with. Career development. So I think I emphasized really the main pieces that really sort of launched my career and helped me feel like I could transition into a faculty position was the mentorship, the professional network, the protected time, which all kind of allows you to build your own niche area and really have the time and space to think and write, which is what we sometimes struggle to have. And that allows you to brainstorm, allows you to write for grants, allows you to publish manuscripts. I just wanted to end by telling you a little bit about what I'm doing now. So as Kimberly mentioned, I'm an assistant clinical professor of dermatology at UCSF. I have a somewhat unique breakdown in that I'm able to be about 50% clinical and 50% research. And I spend about 4 to 6 weeks a year in LMICs. My focus areas now are on scabies control in migrants and refugees, as well as endemic countries, and also lymphedema and wound care in resource-limited settings. And of course, I'm a dermatologist. I'm always trying to push the agenda of developing dermatology capacity in LMICs. I think that is, oh, yes, final photo. So I guess you might see a familiar face, Megan Swanson, that Dr. Strathi highlighted. She was my co-fellow in Uganda. And then in this photo, there's also 2 former GloCal alumni and then 2 of my mentors. So really, my GloCal year was phenomenal, transformative, like I've already mentioned, and the people that I met throughout the year have really impacted my life. I haven't seen all of them moving forward, but some of them I do see regularly, and that year, I just look back on it so fondly, and I'm so grateful that I had that experience and I took that time to do that year.